Hey guys, welcome to Film Darkly. I'm your host, Anthony Pacino, and it's been at least a month since I posted anything. I'm kind of coming off of a cold right now. I still have a bit of a cough, so if I have to take a break to cough, just excuse me for that. The reason I'm not really posting in a while is because everything's just busy right now. I mean, from last week starting school to being sick all week, and also, doing a big trip out of town to Anaheim and going to Disneyland, and also the fact that there hasn't really been a lot of movies that have called me to the theater, and I don't really get the opportunity just to sort of see movies. When they come out, I have to pay for them, so that kind of hurts things. The last big movie having come out was Last Jedi, so, I've seen that movie about 3 times, and so you can only talk about it so many times before you just have no material. And since this channel has become so much of like a review type channel, or podcast, it's really difficult for me to go back and do what I used to do, which was just break down at random films. And the last movie I saw actually was the Insidious 4. I think it's called The Last Key, or I don't know, something like that. It's a really, really terrible movie. It's not very well made. It's just got really poor acting. The scares aren't very good. It does have a pretty semi-cool looking monster. But the comedy in it is just trash. It's quite possibly one of the worst movies I've seen this year. Although I saw The Room for the first time, so nothing really seems to top that. Anyhow, so just lots been going on in my life right now, and just really, really busy and stressed out, a lot of anxiety and stuff going on. So, I just have not been around and haven't been keeping up like I need to, but this is always in the back of my mind. So, here I am because I decided, hey, I got to put something out. And, so I'm going to call back, to when I first started this whole thing, and I was like picking up older films and showing you like kind of the philosophical breakdown. And one of the first movies I ever did, or actually wasn't even a movie, it was more like a character study, was The Dark Knight. I did an entire character study of the Joker. And I got a lot of a lot of comments about that. Like, a lot of people liked it because, I did this full breakdown of the Joker as kind of this nihilist / atheist. And because I kind of see the Joker as like this sort of this perfect atheist, like kind of what atheism should look like. And I know some people kind of like, especially if you're an atheist, you're like, I don't need the Bible to be good and things like that. And it's not really about that. It's about understanding, what it conceptually means to be an atheist, which is one of the reasons why I like the study of the Joker, because he kind of he kind of presents that in a way where you can't doubt it, and that's what I like about his character. The Heath Ledger Joker in the Dark Knight film. And so I decided that I'm going to go ahead and go back and do the trilogy that I've been meaning to do. I was going to continue my little H.P. Lovecraft series with War of the Worlds and stuff, but I decided not to because I just felt like it wouldn't really be something anyone would care to hear about, whereas the Dark Knight series or trilogy still seems to be a very relevant trilogy, especially with all the DC films coming out recently. So that being said, this first part is going to be all about Batman Begins. I'm going to talk about Batman Begins. Then I'm going to do another one where I talk about The Dark Knight, or I'll probably revisit the Joker because I don't know how many people have listened to that original podcast, and there's a lot to say about the Joker character. And then I'll do Dark Knight Rises, obviously, to wrap up this little trilogy. I may stop in between and do movie reviews like usual, but I just figured that I may as well start with this, because this is a really big trilogy that has a lot of concepts within it that are really, really intriguing. And so, the first film, Batman Begins, excuse me for a second, tends to be kind of regarded as like not the best of the series. It actually tends to be regarded as like a great film, but it's not as good as The Dark Knight. And for some people, it's the second best, because some people really trash Dark Knight Rises. Of course, by the end of this, I'll probably make my case for why I feel that The Dark Knight, which is everybody's favorite, and a film that is on some lists as the greatest comic book movie ever made, is actually quite possibly my third favorite of the series. But it's mostly because, like, I appreciate this big wraparound story that begins with Batman Begins. And when I watched Batman Begins, like, when I watched this trilogy, because I usually watch this trilogy all the way through. So, like, if I decide to revisit the Dark Knight series or trilogy, I always start out with Batman Begins, then I go to Dark Knight, then I go to Dark Knight Rises. And what I always find, the most interesting thing, is that I always seem to enjoy this one, the first one, the most. I always enjoy it the most. It's the one I always go back to, and I want to watch it again. And I don't know why. When I first saw this trilogy, it wasn't my favorite. It really wasn't. Batman Begins, I loved it, but it wasn't my favorite. I was like everyone else, it was all about the Dark Knight. But when I rewatched this trilogy, and I watched them all back to back, and I've done that several times, Batman Begins is always the one that just comes off as like the epic one, the masterpiece, if I could put it that way. It always tends to come off as like the one that stands out above the other two, and that sounds so crazy to say, because most people don't think of Batman Begins that way. But I think it's because of the concepts found in Batman Begins. And I think it's because of that story of creating this entity that cannot be destroyed. Bruce sort of like presenting this character that is not limited and has no boundaries, and is never can never be ashamed, can never be truly evil or truly good, but is just like a force to be reckoned with. And it's something that the Joker kind of recognizes in The Dark Knight when he refers to him having no jurisdictions. The Batman has no jurisdictions. And that's the most interesting thing about this movie, is to see, like Batman Begins is really Bruce's movie. It's Bruce Wayne's movie. No villain steals the show. It's all Batman. Batman keeps his movie. And that's a rare thing. It's a very rare thing. You watch the original Michael Keaton Batman. Joker steals the show. Jack Nicholson steals the show. You watch Batman Returns. Penguin and Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer, Danny DeVito, they steal the show. You watch even like the crappy ones, the Joel Schumacher, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin. The villains kind of steal the show. Most people forget George Clooney was even a Batman, or Val Kilmer was even a Batman. You take crappy Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, and Jim Carrey is the Riddler, as being better characters, and they're both really crappy characters. You rewatch that movie, and especially Tommy Lee Jones, I have no idea who he was playing, because that's not Two-Face at all. But it's just intriguing how the villains always manage to steal the show. And when you think of the Dark Knight trilogy, by far, the Dark Knight, it's the Joker. By far, Dark Knight Rises, it's Bane. You think of Bane right away. Even when you look at Batman versus Superman, Batman's a great character, and it's kind of probably one of the only movies where you could think of where he is it is all about him. But even to an extent, you kind of get lost in the versus aspect, and in Justice League, you definitely, find Wonder Woman and other characters are just as popular. So it's like, this is the first and one of the only movies where Batman really, really shines, where it's really about Bruce Wayne. And Batman vs. Superman is probably the only other good example. But I really feel Batman Begins is the movie that does it. And it does it in this really intriguing way by giving us this character, Bruce Wayne, who is struggling with the death of his parents. And he's struggling, and he wants to kill the man who killed his parents, which is, I think his name's Joe Cool. It's Joe something. I wanted to say Cool. But anyways, so he wants to kill him, and he has his friend Rachel Dawes, who's played by Katie Holmes. And she's kind of like, no, Bruce, when she finds out, she slaps him. She's like, your father would be ashamed. And so Bruce has this whole thing about him where he's like trying to figure out how he has to go about this the correct way, because he knows Gotham's too corrupt to do anything. And he finds that out when he has to face off with that crime boss, Falcone. And he goes to confront Falcone. They take him in the restaurant. Falcone tells him, there's a judge sitting right there. There's an attorney or something over here, and chief of police right here. And he's like, and without even thinking for a second, he's like, I could blow your brains out. And he's telling him, like, that's power. He says that's power you can't buy. And so what he's telling Bruce is, he's like, we own Gotham, and there's nothing you can do. Your daddy's gone. Your dad was about the only thing stopping it. We got Gotham. And so Bruce is kind of like, what can I do to change all this? And he decides to abandon his rich lifestyle. He goes off on his own, and he tries to become a criminal in order to understand criminals. And that's his belief. This is when he runs into Henry Ducard, played by Liam Neeson. And Henry Ducard tells him, there's a way to take on your enemy without becoming your enemy. To become something more than that, to become an ideal. Which is, if you take on an ideal, you become something else entirely. And so there's whole concept and idea here of not working alone, but working with this group called the League of Shadows. And this League of Shadows is kind of like a way of not having an identity, but working as an entity where you're able to overthrow the evils of the world. The problem is that Bruce, after he gets trained, finds that he fundamentally disagrees with them, because they feel that the only way to have justice is to destroy iniquity. So it's not about forgiveness of sin and trying to relieve or justify or bring justice. It's about justice is only applicable when you destroy the evil that is corrupting. So rather than filter out the pool and make the water clean, they believe in simply getting rid of the pool altogether. So don't worry about fixing it. Destroy it. Get rid of it. Because if it doesn't exist, you don't have to worry about it. So their method is to purge. And they do it in various ways, which you eventually find out that Ducard, who is actually Ra's al Ghul, and you find out that the League of Shadows, sacked Rome. They've been behind all of these great experiments, if you will, to destroy and take down these corrupted civilizations. And so Gotham, their original plan was to destroy it with a poor economy and to allow the gangs to grow. But Thomas Wayne put a halt to all that, and they never expected that. So their second plan was to go back and to use this device that evaporated water, so that and pouring this chemical into the water so that when it evaporated the water, this chemical would go into the air and it would drive them insane and kill the people of Gotham. And we find that out, and that's where Scarecrow comes in. He's working for Ducard. So Bruce, meanwhile, is kind of becoming this, learning that, hey, if I'm going to fight crime, I have to become something else entirely. And I can't take on what the League of Shadows are doing. I have to do something better than that. I have to be better than them. Excuse me. So, what Bruce decides to do is to take on a persona that doesn't rely on him as a person, and a persona that isn't bordered or isn't held back by the walls of the police. And so for him, it's like, in order for me to do what is truly necessary, it's for me to have no barriers, no boundaries. And so that's what he creates for himself. And he creates the Batman also to share his own fear with those, with his enemies. And so you go through this whole process of how he creates the Batman, and you see like how he evolves it over time, with base jumping, armor, his Batmobile being the tumbler. Really, really interesting and intriguing, and there's a lot of other little story elements in there. But the main part of this whole story is this character, the Batman, that is this indestructible entity that can't be destroyed. And that entity is so powerful, nothing defeats it. And even in The Dark Knight, Joker does not win, he fails. And a lot of people have a hard time with that, where they're like, oh no, it's the first movie where one of the first movies where the bad guy wins. And I've even seen philosophical breakdowns where they're like, the Joker won. No, he didn't. He lost. He fundamentally lost because of this entity known as the Batman. And this is the thing that's going to echo and circle around. Bruce will lose it at times, but Bruce will remember it, and in the end it will return to do what is necessary in order to be victorious. And that's the interesting thing about this character. And so, you have this whole thing where he fights for Gotham, and he fights Henry Ducard's character. And Henry Ducard's character is the one, Liam Neeson, he's the one who sort of, helped him create the Batman. And he's like, you took it a little too serious. But he didn't realize like what Bruce did by creating this character that would bring on justice and would put a halt to all the evils. And he never saw and never recognized what he was capable of and how good Bruce really was, in defeating the League of Shadows and defeating Henry Ducard and that character. And so it's this really intriguing sort of thing that they do though with the Batman character, and reflecting on that. And even when Rachel Dawson knows that he's Batman, there's this whole thing where she's like, I can't be with you until the day comes that you no longer have to wear the mask. And that's the interesting thing, is we began the journey of Bruce trying to figure out where he ends and the Batman begins. And that's, which hence the title of the film. And so that's the real interesting thing about this movie. And you'll find that throughout all these movies, is that the titles literally are within the philosophy of the films. And Batman Begins is an amazing film because of that. It's an amazing film because of this invention of this character, of the Batman. And it's called Batman Begins because literally, it's not just literal, but it's figurative as well. It's figurative because this is, where does the Batman begin? Where does this entity begin? And what exactly does this entity mean? And what is it capable of? And that's the most interesting thing. We're only seeing the beginning of it. We're only seeing what it can partly do, which is to take down criminals and to not be held back by corruption, because we know there's major corruption. And Commissioner Gordon's character, which he's not commissioner in this movie, has to see it himself, dealing with a corrupt partner who's making deal with Falcone's boys. And Batman overnight takes these guys down and overthrows them. If it weren't for Crane and Henry Ducart and their little plan, he could have done it without a hitch. But then, he found out about them and he has to take them down now, too. And The Dark Knight, one of the reasons why I think people like it so much, which people tend to like the middle part of trilogies, is because it's literally the climax of the series. It's the climax of the trilogy. It's the film where the entity of the Batman becomes its most powerful and most potent. And people think that they love that movie because of the Joker, and they don't. They actually love that movie because of the Batman. And because of the way it's so slickly done, it's so slick, the way that, Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan pulled this off, you don't even notice. And some people actually watch The Dark Knight and they're like, the story doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense if you understand it philosophically, but you really have to watch Batman Begins first, because it's the movie that sets it up. And it's the reason why it's my favorite of the trilogy. So anyways, I kind of blabbed on. I hope this rant made some sense. And the next time you hear from me, it'll be for The Dark Knight. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do whatever it is you have to do to follow me and to keep up with my podcast. See you around.